And so when I found a lump, I was nursing my fifth baby, and it was a huge surprise. And when I got the diagnosis, it was so surreal. It didn't seem possible. And everybody was like, "How is that happening to you? You're so healthy and you're doing all this stuff." And so for me, I needed to step back and figure out, like, what was I not doing? What was I missing? Because, at a root level, I don't believe that cancer just magically happens like it's a game of roulette or something. So I found a functional practitioner, and in through addressing these other areas and bringing, things like my hormones back in balance and shoring up deficiencies and things, my body was able to eat away at the cancer, and my immune system was free to do its job where it was addressing the cancer.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about overcoming cancer naturally. I'm delighted to welcome Katrina Foe. Katrina is a board-certified holistic nutritionist, best-selling author, and international speaker who overcame her own cancer 100% naturally. You can reach Katrina at her website, nutritionalpilates.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Katrina. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Hi, Linda. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And I am so excited for this conversation because when you say the word cancer, for many people, their anxiety just goes up and they have a picture in their mind of what this is going to look like. And today we're going to be offering some other possibilities and options for hopefully how to prevent, and if it is diagnosed, something we can do about it. So is it okay if we start with your story?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share. So for me, my family, we had already made a huge amount of changes to diet, lifestyle, making everything natural. I mean, to the extent that we moved to a different state so that we could raise our own meat animals. And so when I found a lump, I was nursing my fifth baby, and it was a huge surprise. And I just didn't really believe that it could be cancer because we had been doing so much. And when I got the diagnosis, it was so surreal. It didn't seem possible. And everybody was like, "How is that happening to you? You're so healthy and you're doing all this stuff." And so for me, I needed to step back and figure out, like, what was I not doing? What was I missing? Because, at a root level, I don't believe that cancer just magically happens like it's a game of roulette or something. Where so I put everything on the table. I purposely chose to set my own biases aside and reevaluate everything because, this is kind of serious. This is my life, and I didn't want to miss something. And so as I went through looking at things, the first thing I decided to do was to go down to Mexico, to a Gerson clinic. And for those of you that may not be familiar, it's a raw vegan diet. You're doing tons of juices and such, a set group of supplements, but it's a really vigorous, very strict, no fat, like literally you only have like a tablespoon a day of flaxseed oil for fat and no salt at all, like at all. And, a lot of this stuff just really, I wanted to understand, because if I was doing something wrong, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be doing it right for the future. So I'd read their books and I still had a lot of questions, and they didn't have a lot of answers. And by the third day, the director of the facility sat me down and wanted to talk. And I had no idea what to expect, but he started out with, "My staff has been saying that when you've been asking a lot of questions," and he just thought that I should trust in the process. And for me, that was a big shock that somebody didn't want to hear my questions and help me understand what was going on, and that frankly, they didn't have answers for me. And so I mentioned this kind of concern that I couldn't really trust him if I didn't have any answers. And they politely told me I needed to leave. I know, right? So I got kicked out of a cancer clinic because I asked too many questions. And to me, the whole thing was like, this is why I'm going alternative, because I want to understand and I want to really dive into and be more participatory. And that clearly wasn't allowed in some of those alternative circles either. So I found a functional practitioner. A friend connected me, and we started doing all these tests. And I had never done any of these tests, and I didn't think anything was going to show up. And a lot showed up. Things that I wasn't feeling symptoms for, that I didn't understand, that I didn't know to look for, that even existed. And in through addressing these other areas and bringing, things like my hormones back in balance and shoring up deficiencies and things, and just overall learning how to listen to my body better and know where my weak spots are, my body was able to eat away at the cancer. And, my immune system was free to do its job where it was addressing the cancer when I supported it through that. And that whole process brought me to this place where I was so curious. I needed to understand more what happened. And that's why I went back to school, because I was so excited to, help other people realize that this was a possibility.
And that is so huge. First of all, to know that this is a possibility. And that is, I'm so excited to talk about all these things. So, one, I want to give a second witness of someone, my grandfather, who also healed from cancer naturally. So, a gazillion years ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And at that point, this was in the 70s, they really didn't have all the treatments that we have today. And he was far enough along that they said, we're so sorry. Just go home and enjoy your remaining time. They figured it'd be a couple months. And my grandma at that time was not quite ready to let him go. And she had read in the newspaper about a Native American who was a healer and claimed that he could take care of cancer. So she contacted him and said, I need help. Please tell me what to do and I will do it. And so he was also on a very strict diet and he had herbs and things to go with, and he cleared it up and he was all good. And one of the sweet nurses from the hospital several months later came to visit to comfort my grandmother, because obviously she had just recently lost her husband or was about to. And she came and said, how are you doing, Mrs. Okeson? And she said, great, doing fantastic. Life is wonderful. And the nurse is like, yeah, right. You're in denial. I'll just give you a pass. He says, well, where's Mr. Okeson? And she said, well, he's out working on the tractor. And then the nurse thought, oh, you liar. There is no way. And so she would not believe my grandmother. And so she physically took her out and showed her he is out working on the tractor. And so I have grown up recognizing that there are alternate ways to do things. And I love that there's more than one way to do things. It just makes me happy. And I love that we get to choose, that there isn't just one way. Now, in your story, I thought it was fascinating that you wanted to ask questions and get answers, and that not just in one place did they not appreciate you asking a question, but in the alternate, they also did not want you to ask questions. Just trust the process, just trust. And so I love that you're willing to ask questions and even step beyond what maybe people are willing to give. And you know what? If you can't help me, let me look over here. Let me see if I can find some answers over here. And so I'm so grateful that you found the answers and that you were able to get the results that you wanted. And not only for your body, but also for your mind. And now you're in a position where you can pay it forward and say, hey, here's some stuff that works. So since you are our expert, I would love, people who are listening are probably thinking, wait, what? There are things that I can do? So functional diagnostic, let's talk a little bit about that, because not everybody is aware of what that is.
Absolutely. I first just have to say, I absolutely love that story about your grandfather. That's fantastic. It just makes me giggle. It's so out of the box, what you're not expecting. Yes. So with functional testing, we can see so much in terms of how the entire body is operating and how in or out of balance it is. And there are 10 areas that I look at to see how the body's doing with these tests. And these 10 areas are areas that we have seen in research, as well as clinically, to be associated with cancer, These are things that are driving and kind of the root causes of cancer. And I'm happy to explain those. But before I dive in, I just want to really point out it's not one of these things. Most people hear me talk about this and they're like, oh, that's the one thing. And I'm like, now, it's usually 6 to 8 of these things that are off with clients. So it creates this like perfect storm of problems that's enough to knock down the immune system, which is one of the areas. And that is where our body has designated cancer should be addressed by the immune system. There is those natural killer cells that are designed to go after and attack rogue cancer cells and to prevent, tumors from forming and address the tumors if they get there. So when the immune system is taken out, we want to look at why, what is going on with that person so that we can not only clear out the debris, shore up the deficiencies and such, and allow that immune system to do what it's supposed to do, but also so that it can stay that way. And that's the really important thing, in my opinion, because, even if you get clear of that tumor, I think most cancer survivors will agree that having that, black cloud hanging over you of, is it going to come back? Let's do your rescan. And it's like, is it going to be there? That's almost as bad, if not worse, than having the cancer in the first place, of that fear of it coming back. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are wondering the 10 areas. Would you like to meet? Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, so the first area is metabolic. Now, we know the defining factor of a cancer cell is that it's metabolically shifted. This was established with the Nobel Prize by Otto Warburg in the 1930s. And so with that, it needs a huge amount of blood sugar to keep it fueled, because it's a very inefficient metabolism that a cancer cell shifts to. So that has to do with our blood sugar. We want to try to keep it as regulated as possible, because if we are dysregulated, we are literally giving double or triple the amount of fuel to the cancer cells, which means it's going to grow faster. Okay, so we want to starve the cancer. Now, we can't get our blood sugar to zero, or we would die too, but we want to keep it in a nice normal range at least. And then we get clients into ketosis, which then adds the therapeutic level of ketones, which is very, very healing in a million different ways, especially for cancer. Along that note, another one of the areas that I look at is angiogenesis. So when a cancer cell needs a huge amount of blood sugar to grow, it will actually signal the body to create new blood vessels so that it gets more sugar in the blood. And that's called angiogenesis. So we want to try to minimize that. And again, there's markers like copper and ceruloplasmin and VEGF that will show us if this is happening, so that we can then use natural supplements to calm it down and minimize that. The hormones. When we talk about cancer, a lot of us are talking about hormones and hormone positive, all this kind of stuff. And so we definitely know that sex hormones are a big factor, particularly estrogen dominance and such. So we want to make sure to get those in balance. Looking at the detox pathways and how the body is processing these as well is very important. And I just want to distinguish, when people talk about hormone dominant cancers, they're talking about hormone receptors on the tumor, which is giving us indication of how screwed up those cells are, how messed up. And that has to do with staging and such. What I'm talking about is the hormones in the woman's body or man that are driving the or allowing the cancer to proliferate. So oncologists aren't testing this. This is a big deal. And we really want to look at this, especially preventatively, but also proactively afterwards. This is also going to incorporate the thyroid hormones, which is notoriously misdiagnosed and missed. And so when the thyroid hormones are kind of sluggish, that means that the whole body, all the systems, including the immune system, are not being energized properly to do their job. Another section is the microbiome. And there's lots of great information on how interconnected the microbiome is with everything, but also with these hormones. If you have a dysbiotic gut, lots of bad bacteria overgrowth, they can produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which one of the things, it'll throw those sex hormones, those estrogens, back into circulation. So that's one of the ways that inappropriate gut can mess with the body and promote cancer. There's a lot of other ways, and we want to explore all of them. Stress. Most of us understand that stress in the body is very harmful, but it can actually drive cancer. So we want to look at those adrenal hormones and that circadian rhythm of the cortisol and melatonin that puts us awake and puts us to sleep, and make sure that that is regulated, because that will be a huge driver of inflammation and such. But also, you want to keep in mind that the body's, rejuvenation healing period is during sleep. And so we want to make sure that that's happening. Seems little, but all those things add up. Epigenetics. So we have probably grown up hearing that genetics is what causes most cancers. And they're looking for genetic this and genetic that. But the truth is that less than 10% of cancers are caused by genetics. Now, there are a lot of things you can do looking at your genetics, though, to see what you're predisposed to. And by knowing this, there are diet and lifestyle things you can do to flip on and off these genes so that they have a more favorable outcome. And these things that you can do with diet and lifestyle are called epigenetics. And they have been shown to be more powerful than genetics. So it's really important to know what's going on inside you and what you're predisposed for. And that was really powerful to me. I had no idea. And there were a lot of things off there. Environmental toxins. This is one of the areas that people are not talking about enough, in my opinion. We have boatloads of research talking about this is carcinogenic, and yet no one's looking at what carcinogens are in a cancer client's daily life. So somebody comes in, they have a tumor, they get rid of the tumor, and they send it back home into a home that's full of mold, maybe some lead paint with a mouthful of amalgams, and they're eating everything in plastic in the microwave, and no one says anything. And then it's this big shocker. Oh my goodness, the cancer came back. It's really sad because this is in the research. This is not like hocus pocus stuff. I mentioned the immune system. That's, things like autoimmune and, low vitamin D levels and such can really knock out that immune system that's designed to actually address these cancer cells. So we want to make sure that immune system is running full throttle in an appropriate way. Inflammation. So when cancer clients present, they are usually a ball of fire. And one of the big things that we want to do is to calm everything down. And I'll use these markers, the high sensitivity C-reactive protein, the SED rate, and the LDH, to actually look at when things start to go sideways before things are spreading on a tumor level, to watch and monitor what's going on. And then last but not least is the mental emotional component. This is where no one's talking about it. But what we see clinically is that about a year prior to a cancer diagnosis, there is usually something that has deeply hurt and impacted the cancer client's heart. And that trauma, whether it's an abusive relationship, a loss of a job, or a loved one, something is going on. And you really want to make sure that you deal with that, because our emotions manifest themselves in our tissues and can create disease. And we want to energetically make sure that we address the entire body, not just the chemical aspects. So that was a quick synopsis of all 10. If your listeners are interested, I would be happy to give you a free copy of my ebook, The Roadmap to Prevent Cancer Recurrence. And I go into these tests in more detail that go for each different section that I just talked about and a lot more.
Wow, I am so glad that you didn't stop asking questions and that you continued until you found some answers and that you went back to school and learned more. As you're going through these lists, many of these, it's like, yes, yes, yes. And there are a couple, it's like, did not know that, did not know that. So this is really fun because I love to learn new things and to be able to understand some more things about how things connect. So, wow, so much, so much. I'm not even sure what direction to take from here because everything is so good. If it's okay, I would like to talk for just a second about epigenetics. And I loved how you brought up that for a long time we thought genetics, if mom had this, if dad had this, if grandpa had this, if you had uncle, so sad, too bad, sucks for you, enjoy because it's coming. and there's nothing you can do about it. And then to recognize the epigenetics, and many people are not aware of what that is, but I appreciate you introducing it and talking about it. But it literally means on top of genetics. And epigenetics is totally different. It's not cast in concrete. It's malleable. It changes. And it changes by what we do. It changes by our environment. It changes by how we think. We can change it. And that epigenetics on top can turn things on and turn things off. So let's say, hey, I've got a cancer gene. Okay, it's there. My epigenetics on top say, let's keep that turned off. We don't need that. And I'm totally fine. And I don't have to worry about it at all. And because we have this information that there's something we can do about it, it's so empowering. It's not like the information, or unfortunately misinformation, that we had years ago, where it's so sad, too bad, sucks for you. Where now it's, oh, you have that. Okay. Just like you said, well, what can we do about it? There are things here that we can do. And I love this is so holistic. It's not just where you went to Mexico and had this experience of eating in a way that, as you describe it, sounds quite miserable, but it's probably good for you. But it's not suffering so that we can have something good later on. Let's look at the whole picture. And as you said, there's like usually 6 or 8 things that are out of balance that we need to kind of work on. So now what you describe with these 10 things, and I was taking notes as fast as I could, are these the tests, or are these the areas? I mean,
Yeah, that's a good question. So these are the kind of the buckets, if you will, and there's multiple tests and multiple markers that kind of overlap in different areas. So like there's, hormone tests, and we'll look at hormone panels and different things. Gut tests, looking at the stool and things, depending on the bucket. Some of them have more or less tests, and some of the tests fall into multiple buckets.
okay, that's good to know. And I guess the next question, I'm sure people are wondering, where do I get these tests? And we're going to have your contact information. Is that where they go? Or where can we go to say, hey, I would like to have my inflammation tested. How am I doing there? I would like to have this tested. Do you have to do the whole panel and do all? Is there like a start and then a branch where it's like, okay, do one test and let's say, okay, this one is out of balance. So now let's learn more. Maybe there's 2 or 3 tests in this particular area. I mean, is there a starting point, or do I have to have 5 million tests to get some information?
That's a really great question. So it can be really confusing. So I'm going to kind of back up because there are a lot of questions in there.
Sorry.
So no, it's totally fine. So in my roadmap, I list out the specific tests so that people know what to look for. And you could take those to your doctor. Most standard of care doctors are not using most of these tests. They do blood work. Most of the time, they won't run all the blood work that you need. So it gets a little sticky. And this is not usually going to be covered by insurance for that reason. Most functional practitioners would be using these tests. And each functional practitioner has different tests they like for different things. So I can't promise everybody would be using everything. The difference really comes in when functional practitioners are interpreting the results. So when I'm looking at these tests, I'm looking at them in light of cancer. And there's things that you do different for cancer, or, when someone's actively cancering than you would for somebody else. So looking at them all together, a lot of times I've had clients come and they're like, I have all these tests, I don't know what to do with them. So it's not just getting the test, it's then knowing how to interpret them and knowing what it shows and what to do or not do. So my program, Cancer Freedom, my way I look at it is I do not want to miss anything. And with cancer, a lot of times there's a little ticking time clock. So the way most functional practitioners work is kind of how you're talking about, oh, I'm going to, your symptoms look like this. So let's start there, do the test. Okay, that didn't clear up. Let's do this. Let's try this. That can take a really long time. And a cancer client doesn't always have or want to take that long. So, and quite frankly, you don't want to miss something. So I do all the tests right up front, which is a lot of tests. But that way, we get all the smoking guns on the table. And the biggest thing is that we want to prioritize. Some of these things need to be addressed first. If somebody's got mold toxicity, you need to get them out of the house that has mold in it before you start trying to heal their gut or their hormones, because it's not going to change and you're going to waste a lot of time and money if you don't address the mold first. But if you don't know there's mold or don't run the mold test, you don't know this. So you can be kind of spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. And that's where running all the tests up front, yes, it can be expensive, but when you're talking about cancer, it's worth it to make sure that you don't miss something along the way.
Right. And money. Darn it, that always is a factor. Whenever you have health issues, it also runs into financial issues, which is such a bummer.
It
I
is.
wish I wish these tests were covered under insurance, but I guess maybe as we let people know that this is a good thing, maybe as more people ask, maybe we'll go that direction. But right now, it is what it is. And so it is an investment in your life. So that's the way we kind of have to look at it. Can you give us a ballpark of if when you say you're going to run all these tests and it's expensive, how much?
It depends on who you're talking to, but there's several thousand. And it's tricky because you're not going to be just paying for the test. You're going to be paying for the services and then the protocols. And, I tell all my clients, you need to make sure that you're ready for the investment because it's not just the financial. The biggest thing is the time and the energy to do all the protocols. Because while some of this stuff, is better than losing all your hair and having surgery that scars you, it isn't easy. It's not like just popping a pill. It's, doing saunas every day and coffee enemas every day and weird, strange things and changing and learning how to eat in new ways and cook different things, which, there's a pretty steep learning curve and it's nice to have help with that, and so you'll want to have some, people around you to help guide you and give you resources and such because it's not just the financial of the test.
What an excellent point. An excellent point. Authentic healing, I think, is not instantaneous, like flipping on a light switch, where we all want to just take a pill and have it instantly be gone. And if there was a pill that instantly worked, sign me up. I'd do that. I mean, I love fast and easy, but I also love things that are real. And since unfortunately the fast and easy isn't real, then we have to go with what is. And
Yeah.
so that expending that time and that energy, and as you were talking about how there's a steep learning curve, I have a son who is struggling with ADD and a bunch of other things, and in order to help him, I needed to go to get him off gluten and dairy and sugar. And as you're describing this learning curve, I did that for 18 months, and I felt like I lived in the kitchen that whole time because I didn't know how to cook anything without those things. I didn't know how to, and this was before, I mean, now there are more gluten-free options, but I didn't know how to make bread. I spent so much time trying to get something that was edible and beyond edible to good. But from the beginning of just feeling like I was going to die to the end where we could have company over, no one ever knew that we were having any sort of special diet because it was just good food. However, now that he doesn't need it, we're right back to all the normals because it's so much easier. But I understand that it is a big challenge when you have that lifestyle change and that learning curve. So been there, done that, could do it again, don't want to, but we do what we got to do, right?
Exactly. There's a lot to it. And I think that's where when people are looking at alternative care, a lot of times they're looking for a magic bullet that just isn't pharmaceutical. And the interesting thing is that, I mean, it's still the same mentality. And they're like, is it IV vitamin C? Is it mistletoe? Is it, and there are so many great treatments out there, but like IV vitamin C, this can actually speed things up and worsen things if somebody is in the wrong metabolic state. And people don't realize this. And you need to test the G6PD to see if it's in a state that, the IV vitamin C is going to be too oxidative. And this is why I say you want to look at things in light of cancer. And I just have a hard time because a lot of times practitioners and alternative therapies are just, they're trying to keep their business afloat, just like the oncologists are. And, it's a money-making business, where I don't want to throw them under the bus, but, they've got an IV suite and everybody should go in the IV suite, and when you look at all the tests, what you can see is, hey, this person, like, that's not the best use of your time and money because it's not going to move the dial as much as this therapy over here. And that's the beauty of seeing which of the 10 areas are really going to move the dial for you specifically at that point in time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what a huge difference. When you're recognizing what the root cause is, then we can address the cause rather than just the symptoms. And that root cause is specific to that person and even that time versus just giving a blanket, let's all get IVs, or let's all do this, or let's all do that. I mean, there are some basic eating healthy is always going to be a good idea, and getting enough rest is always going to be a good idea. But for those specific, when you're looking at cancer, we're looking beyond, is this a good idea? We're looking for, is this going to heal me? Is
Yeah.
this going to make me so that I can live a longer and healthy, happy, fulfilling life?
Yes, exactly. And, with cancer, we're trying to turn the Titanic around. This is not just be healthy, maintain. This is like shift major things, shift a lot of major things and do it fast. And it's not something to mess around with and take your time about because things can speed up very quickly if people are not taking it seriously a lot of times. And, with alternative therapies, it's sad to see if people put all their eggs in one basket without testing, and then they're like, wait, that was supposed to work, and it's just hard to watch sometimes. A lot of times with alternative therapies, you get a bad rap because people are not doing the testing, and then they're like, well, see, that didn't work. Like, well,
That's
it was the
interesting.
right treatment for them.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked a few times about time. Time is of the essence, especially when we're talking with cancer, because we have a time limit. If we don't win, then we die. And we've also talked about that there isn't an instantaneous quick fix. So, what is a reasonable amount of time to say, here's where I am? How long might this take in order to be back on track in that good place?
That is $1 million question there. So again, it really depends on the individual. So my program is a year long, and that usually gives people enough time to do the testing, do the diet shifts, and address the things that are going on. Now that's assuming a lot of things. So if people are in a more aggressive stage 3, stage 4, where there's things that are more progressed, it may take longer. If people dilly dally around and don't jump into their protocols immediately, I've seen this, and it's very frustrating because as much as I would like to, I can't go home and do the protocols for them and cook for them. It may take longer. It may not turn around at all if they don't do things. If people are working on things proactively, or a lot of clients come to work with me where they've done standard of care and they've then listened to podcasts like this and learned that they weren't dealing with the root issue and want to come back and make sure it's not going to come back by dealing with it functionally. Those two groups of people, they've got time on their side. It's not as urgent. They're usually in better health so that they can make changes faster and do more aggressive therapies and protocols and such. So it can be quicker. It just depends on the person, the state they're in, and their motivation.
Absolutely. And you're right. That is a rather open-ended question because it depends not only on the type of cancer, the progression of the cancer, but the willingness of the person to go all in and do something about it. So oftentimes we have an idea about our health that we want to just hand it over to someone else. Can I hand it over to this doctor? Or can I hand it over to Katrina? And as you mentioned, you can't go home and cook for them. You can't eat for them. You can't sleep for them. You can't do those things that need to take place. And so no matter where we go, no matter what route we choose, and again, I love that there's more than one way to do things, but in all of them, we are a part of the solution. And if we don't accept that responsibility and that accountability, then we're powerless. And that's not what I choose to be.
Oh,
So
that is beautiful. So that is one of my biggest passions. So I want to help clients to know what their root causes are But then I don't want to stop there. I want to make sure that they understand how that applies to their life. So, like you said, they can take responsibility and they don't have to live in fear. They know what choices to make diet long term. They know what tests to watch and what symptoms to look for and how to listen to their body. It's not a passive thing. And I think that if I had to answer, I would say that that's probably the biggest factor with success with people. Those that are willing to be active and take responsibility for their health and engage in it, they're the ones that are going to get better. And I would say that's probably the biggest factor I see.
That is absolutely beautiful. And you brought out such a key word, the word fear. And I think as we get more information and as we become more empowered, we don't have to fear. And that is such a beautiful, peaceful way to live. You can be in a state of peace even when you are in this phase of healing your body from cancer, because there's power, there is good information to help understand the root causes and something to do about it. So it's not just shooting in the dark. It is, this is a problem. Let's correct it. So I love that. Okay, Katrina, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I love getting the message out there that, it's not one thing and that it's really important to test and take responsibility. There's so many options out there. And I'm just excited to give people that message of hope because, if I can turn my cancer around, get in remission, I've got so many clients and friends that have done the same. I want people to know that that's a possibility.
And what a beautiful message of hope. Thank you so much, Katrina, for sharing. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Stuart Scott. He said, "You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and in the manner in which you live." Whether you're enjoying wonderful health or fighting some chronic disease, today I invite you to examine how you live and why you live so you can experience better health and happiness. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the Free Stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.